Have you ever laid next to someone you love, so close you could hear her breathing, and still felt like the loneliest man in the world? Not because of anger, not because of betrayal, but because somewhere along the way, the warmth between you faded into silence. You wonder, is it her slipping away, or me slowly disappearing? If you've ever felt that hollow space growing between you and someone you still love, you're not alone. Stay with me, because before this story ends, you'll hear the one question that can bring two people back from silence, and maybe even save a love that's still alive underneath it all. There's something no one tells you about love. It doesn't break with one big argument. It doesn't collapse in one awful moment. It erodes quietly, in the spaces where laughter used to live, in the glances that no longer linger, in the touch that hesitates instead of reaching out. Love doesn't die from a firestorm. It dies from dust, from days turning into routines, from conversations that stay safe instead of honest. Maybe you're feeling that right now. You still care, you still share a home, you still share a bed, but there's a silence between you, and no one dares to name it. Today, I want to tell you a story about a man who thought he was alone in this feeling, until he discovered something that changed everything. His name is Jack. He's 62 years old, married for 35 years to a woman he still deeply loves. From the outside, everything looked fine. No slammed doors, no betrayals, just two people quietly living side by side and drifting further apart without meaning to. Jack didn't lose his marriage to anger or to betrayal. He lost it to quiet. And one morning, while digging through the attic, he found a letter, faded, handwritten, and carrying the kind of wisdom you don't realize you need until it's almost too late. It said, "See her. Every day, with your heart, not just your eyes." Jack sat there, holding that fragile piece of paper, and realized he couldn't remember the last time he had really seen her. Not her smile, not her sighs, not the weight she carried in her shoulders. At the end of the day, that was the moment Jack knew. If he kept drifting, he would lose her, without either of them ever saying a word. That same day, without a word to his wife, he packs a bag, not to run, but to remember, and he heads to see someone. His mother once trusted, a woman named Ruth, and what she tells him changes everything. Before we go any further, let me ask you something personal. Have you ever felt that quiet space between you and the woman you love? Not anger, not conflict, just distance. You share a home, maybe even a bed, but you don't share yourselves anymore. She's there, you're there, but it feels like something's gone missing and neither of you wants to admit it. If that's ever been you, type 1 in the comments. If you've been lucky enough to avoid it, type 0. No shame either way, just truth, because this, what we're talking about, it happens to more men than you think, especially after 50, and most of us, we stay silent. But here's the thing, sometimes the smallest shift in how we see love can bring the biggest shift in how we feel it. So stay with me, because one small insight might just open a door back to her heart. Let me take you back to a time Jack still remembers vividly. Jack remembers when love felt easy, late-night talks that drifted until sunrise, coffee in bed on slow, Sundays, the way she'd throw her head back when he said something stupid just to make her laugh. Back then, even silence felt connected. Now, it's quiet in a different way, not peaceful, just empty. The house is still full of furniture, bills, routines. But the warmth, that's gone. He's not angry. There's no resentment, just a dull ache he can't name. He watches her move through their mornings, making tea, feeding the cat, answering emails. She still asks if he needs anything, still folds his laundry, still remembers his favorite jam, but her eyes don't linger on him the way they used to, and his hands, they hover. He thinks about reaching for her, then stops, because he doesn't know if she wants that closeness anymore, or worse. If he does, there were times he tried to open up, told her about regrets, about the things that kept him up at night, about the fear that maybe he'd missed something big in life. She listened politely, but something shifted. Instead of pulling her closer, the honesty seemed to push her away. He didn't understand it then. He thought vulnerability meant trust, but now he sees it wasn't just the words, it was the timing, the weight. She wasn't ready to carry what he was still learning to hold himself, and little by little, they stopped asking the real questions. They started swapping emotional connection for logistics, schedules, groceries, who's paying the power bill. They still loved each other. But the laughter, the reaching, the spark that used to light her eyes when he walked into the room, that part of them was drifting out of reach until one forgotten morning when something unexpected called to him from the past. It was buried in an old cedar box in the attic, tucked between faded photos and war medals. Jack hadn't opened that box in years, but something that morning, something he couldn't name, pulled him up there. The smell of dust, the creak of floorboards, the kind of silence that makes you listen. He was digging through the past when he found it. A letter, handwritten, weathered. From time, but still neatly folded. It was from his father, a man who had never said much, but somehow always saw everything. Jack unfolded it slowly, like opening a fragile truth. The ink was fading, but the words were clear. Love isn't what you say, it's what you notice. He read it twice, then a third time, and something in him shifted, not with tears, not with pain, but with quiet recognition, because he couldn't remember the last time he'd really noticed her, not her perfume, not the way she sighed before falling. Asleep, not the heaviness in her shoulders after a long day. He used to see her now. He only saw through her. That night Jack lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning like a clock he couldn't stop. By morning, he was moving without thinking. He packed a small duffel. No real plan, no long explanation. His wife asked if everything was okay. He smiled, kissed her forehead. "I just need a few days to clear my head." She didn't press, she just nodded, and Jack walked out the door. Keys in one hand, his father's letter in the other. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew this: he couldn't keep drifting. Not if he wanted to find his way back, to her, to himself, to something real. So with nothing but hope and an old memory to guide him, Jack set out on the road. It took Jack 4 hours to reach the edge of the woods. No GPS, just a name and a memory his mother once whispered to him long ago. "Go see Ruth, if your heart ever forgets how to speak." The road narrowed, then turned to gravel, then to dirt, and finally it ended at a gate wrapped in ivy. Beyond it sat a small cottage. Weathered wood, curtains fluttering, the smell of pine, books, and something herbal hung in the air, like old wisdom. Jack stepped out of the car. His chest felt tight, not with fear, but with the kind of weight you feel before something sacred. He knocked once. The door creaked open almost instantly. There she stood, older than he'd imagined, long silver hair braided over one shoulder, eyes like still water, calm, clear, knowing. She didn't ask who he was. She just said, "You came. Come in, Jack." Inside was warm, lit by firelight and quiet. There were old wooden shelves lined with worn books and dried lavender. 2 chairs sat facing the hearth. She gestured for him to sit, poured tea. Didn't rush. She waited. Jack sat, cup in hand, staring at the flames, and then he said it, the thing he hadn't said out loud, not even to himself. "I don't know what's wrong," he whispered, "but I feel invisible in my own marriage." Ruth didn't flinch, didn't frown. She just nodded slowly, like she'd heard those words 100 times before. "Most men don't fall out of love," she said. She looked at him, gently, deeply. "They fall out of attention." Jack felt that, right in his chest, like something he already knew. but needed to hear from someone else, to believe it again. As the fire crackled quietly between them, Jack found the courage to speak his hidden truth. The fire crackled between them. Jack sat still, holding his tea, but not drinking it. Ruth watched him for a long moment, not with pity, not with judgment, but with the kind of eyes that have seen love rise and fall more times than most people dare admit. Then she said it, softly, but with weight. You can love someone, Jack, and still make them feel completely alone. Jack swallowed, stared into the fire. His fingers tightened around the cup. Ruth leaned forward. Love is a feeling, she said, but connection, that's a choice. It's made or forgotten, one small moment at a time. She paused, let the silence stretch like a bridge between them. Then her voice softened. When was the last time you asked her how she really felt? Not what she wanted for dinner, not how her day was, but how her heart is doing. Jack didn't answer. He couldn't. Ruth continued. When did you last notice the way she tucks her hair behind her ear when she's nervous, or the way she rubs her own arm gently before falling asleep? Jack felt something shift inside him, a sharp ache that wasn't quite pain, but wasn't far from it either. Ruth leaned back, eyes still on him. When did you stop looking at her like she's still the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? Jack blinked hard. Once, then again. He hadn't come there to cry, hadn't expected to feel exposed, but Ruth's voice didn't cut. It cracked something open, and what poured out wasn't weakness, it was truth. A truth he hadn't said out loud, one he'd buried beneath years of routine. And now, in that little cottage filled with smoke and silence, it finally found its way to the surface. Ruth listened, and when the moment was right, she shared something most men never hear spoken out loud. Ruth let the silence hang before she spoke again. Women don't shut down because they stop loving, she said. Her voice was soft, measured, but it hit like truth. They shut down because they stop feeling safe being seen. Jack frowned, a small, involuntary twitch of his brow. She always says she's fine, he murmured. Ruth nodded slowly. Eyes steady. She says she's fine, she echoed, because she's tired of asking to be noticed. Those words hit deeper than he expected. Jack looked down at his hands. When was the last time he noticed her? Really noticed, not her schedule, not what needed doing, but her, Ruth continued. For a woman, closeness doesn't begin beyond physical. Closeness, Jack. It begins in the space between words. It begins in how you look at her, speak to her, reach for her with no expectation in return. Jack swallowed hard. He thought about the way they'd gone days, sometimes weeks without touching, not out of anger, but habit. He used to brush the hair from her face just to see her eyes, used to know when she was sad without her saying a word. Now he couldn't even remember if she still drank jasmine tea or if she'd quietly switched to chamomile. He was there, present in body, but absent in spirit. And maybe, just maybe, some of the things he thought were honest conversations, his regrets, his struggles, his self-doubt, had been too soon, too heavy. Not because they were wrong, but because she hadn't felt secure enough to carry them. Timing matters, Ruth said, almost reading his thoughts. What you call sharing can feel like spilling. Jack nodded. Sometimes the most vulnerable thing you can do is see her before asking to be seen. Jack sat quietly, waiting for advice, but Ruth offered something far more valuable. Ruth didn't hand him a checklist. She didn't tell him to buy flowers, or write a long apology, or make some grand, dramatic gesture. She just offered presence, stillness, and the kind of wisdom that doesn't come from books, but from heartbreak survived. Start here, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Not with fixing, not with explaining, with seeing. Jack leaned in. Look at her, not the version you married, not the mother, not the roommate. She paused, then added softly, see the woman she is now, the one who's been quietly showing up, even when you haven't been watching. Jack felt the weight of that. Then Ruth said the words that would stay with him for the rest of his life. When you get home, ask her one thing. She looked him in the eyes. What have you been carrying alone? It was simple, but Jack knew if. He asked that question with his heart open. Everything could change. He didn't need a plan. He just needed to go. So he stood, thanked Ruth, and walked to the door. It was time to stop drifting and start returning. With Ruth's words still echoing in his heart, Jack stepped into the long, quiet journey back home. Jack didn't rush back. He took the long road home, windows down, wind on his face, heart beating slower but deeper. He didn't have a script, no speech prepared, just a question, and the courage to ask it. When he walked in the door, the house was quiet. Even the dog didn't bark. His wife, Marianne, was in the living room reading. She looked up, smiled politely. "Hey," she said, like she always did. Jack smiled back. But this time, he didn't walk past her. He sat beside her, turned off the lamp, turned off the noise. No TV, no distractions, just silence, the kind that makes space for truth. He took her hand, held it gently, like it was something he almost forgot how to do. Her eyes searched his face, and Jack said in a voice that trembled just slightly, "I've been distant, and I miss you." He swallowed. Then, remembering Ruth's words, he looked her in the eyes and asked, "What have you been carrying alone?" Marianne froze just for a second, then something in her cracked, but not in a way that broke her. Her eyes filled, not with blame, not with anger, but with a kind of quiet relief. She looked at him, really looked, and whispered, "I thought you'd stopped seeing me." Jack didn't look away. He just held her hand tighter and stayed. What happened next wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was something better, steady, quiet, and real. In the weeks that followed, Jack didn't reinvent himself. He didn't start reciting poetry. He didn't whisk her away on candlelit adventures like in some movie, but he showed up, fully, quietly, present. He began to notice what he once overlooked. The soft hum Marianne made while she prepared dinner, the way she curled her feet beneath a blanket before drifting to sleep, the new silver glint in her hair that somehow made her even more beautiful. He touched her again, not to expect something in return, but simply because he wanted to be near her. A light touch on her back as he passed by, a gentle squeeze of her shoulder when she seemed weary, brushing her hair from her face just to find her eyes. And he asked questions, not routine ones like, "What's for dinner?" but the ones that reached deeper. What's been on your mind lately? What dreams are still tucked away inside you? Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something between them began to shift. She leaned into him again, not with grand gestures, but in small, precious moments, the ones that mean everything. One night, as they stood shoulder to shoulder at the kitchen sink, she turned and smiled at him, not out of politeness, but out of recognition, out of something waking back up. It wasn't fireworks. It was something far richer, familiar, safe, alive. And every time her eyes met his like that, the space that once stretched wide between them, that canyon of quiet, closed just a little more bit by bit, breath by breath, presence by presence. Because sometimes love doesn't need a grand gesture to come back to life. It just needs someone brave enough to start seeing. Again, if this touched something inside you, leave a comment below and simply say, "I'm ready to see her again." I read every comment, and if you're feeling even a fraction of what Jack felt, you're not alone. And if there's a man you know who needs this reminder, someone quietly wondering if the love he built still has a chance, share this with him, because sometimes one quiet message sent at the right moment can save a love story that still has so much left to write. If you're a man over 50 and lately the woman beside you feels a little farther away, not gone, just dimmed, Let me offer you something that may be hard to hear, but even harder to ignore. Maybe it's not that love is broken. Maybe it's that love has been neglected. Real love doesn't shatter in a single fight. It doesn't fall apart in one explosion. No, real love, the kind built year after year, it dies quietly. It dies when words are reduced to logistics, when the sparkle fades from simple glances, when the person you chose becomes more memory than partner. But it doesn't have to stay that way. You don't need to become a brand new man. You just need to become a present one. Start small. Meet her eyes when she speaks, not just to hear her words, but to truly see her soul. Say her name not out of routine, but with the reverence it once held. Remember how she likes her tea. Notice how her shoulders droop after a long day. See her, and above all, ask her the question that can open the door back to her heart. What have you been carrying alone? Then don't jump to fix it. Don't offer solutions. Just listen. Let her fill the space you create with her truth. Let her feel the thing she's likely been missing for far too long. Safety, visibility, love without expectation. You don't have to rebuild your marriage overnight. You simply have to begin. One honest moment, one real glance, one act of tender presence at a time. Because when a woman feels truly seen, her heart softens in ways no words could ever fully capture. You'll see it in the way she looks at you again, the way her walls quietly fall, the way her hands find yours without thinking. What you get back, it won't just be closeness, it will be life. The vibrant, sacred kind of life you thought had disappeared, but had only been waiting for you to come back emotionally. So if this stirred something in your chest, if you've been carrying the heavy, silence alone, if you wonder whether the connection you once had could still be waiting for you, let me tell you, it is. It starts with your presence, it deepens with your patience, and it grows wherever your attention lingers. You don't need fireworks, you just need intention, and that alone can breathe life back into a love story that still has many beautiful chapters left to write. So take the first small step, turn off the TV, sit beside her, ask the question, and then stay. If this touched you, leave a comment below and share what part of Jack's journey spoke to your heart. Type "I'm ready" if you're choosing to reconnect, starting today. And if you know another man who might be standing at the same crossroads Jack once faced, share this with him, because sometimes one quiet moment, one small act of presence can save a relationship that still has so much life left in it. And that, my friend, is the power of being truly present.